I begin this morning with a question. How many of you would like to wake up tomorrow morning and hear the newscaster say, "Today, the whole world is at peace"? Unanimous response. What a relief. What a relief it would be to hear that every conflict between nations, every conflict between individuals had been resolved. Instead of stories of violence, the news media would be telling stories of peace. Instead of scenes of brokenness and separation, there would be scenes of healing and coming together. Children would again be free to play in the parks and streets. Teenagers could again move through their neighborhoods without fear of being attacked by predators or gangs. In a world of peace, persons of all ages would feel free to come and go. There would be no more domestic violence ending in murder. There would be no more war. Instead of buying guns to defend themselves, people would bring all their weapons to be melted down in statues of peace. Flowers and grass would grow again in vacant alleys and empty city blocks where children had been afraid to roam. In the political capitals of the world, heads of government would call together the brightest and the best, the most creative thinkers available to brainstorm ways to transform munitions manufacturing plants into production centers for peace industry. No more would there be the headlines featuring the Iraqs in the world, the Afghanistans, the Syrias, the Palestines, the Israels, also calling together their creative best. But in today's world, most of that is to be energizing power and looking for ways to defeat the neighbor. All the armies of the world would be dismantled and set home. Soldiers from all the nation's armies around the world would be given notice that they would soon be without a job. And in their place, they would be given new jobs, jobs that could create peace and understanding and bring people together and could heal the hurt that had been brought about by the warfare. Everyone from the youngest children to the oldest grandparents would be trained to resolve conflicts with peaceful, nonviolent strategies. The total world would be at peace. Impossible, you say. Impossible. Look at all the conflict around us. How could that ever be? But wait. Hasn't Jesus just said to us, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. It's not as the world gives that I give to you." Or as the Living Bible translates John 14:27, "I am leaving you with a gift. I am leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give isn't fragile like the peace the world gives." We have just come through a weekend, we're coming through a weekend where the world has celebrated the toughness of nations. People have given verbal expression to the might that has generated the freedom that we enjoy. And yet Jesus says, it's not like that the world gives that I give peace. This is not where the peace is going to be. The peace is going to come not by might, but by what is in our heart and what is in our mind. Have you and I ever witnessed a peace which was brought about by forceful means that didn't turn out to be very fragile. The peace which is secured by the so-called peaceful means of this world are at best very, very short-lived. In the current issue of Washington Memo, a publication of Mennonite Central Committee, the focus is on the U.S. Syria policy and dealing with the conflict which continues to rage out of control in Syria and its neighboring countries. In the feature article titled, "We Can't Reach Peace Through Violence," Rachel Lindacker-Schlebaugh writes the following: "The conflict in Syria defies easy answers. The largely nonviolent revolution in March 2011 stemmed from economic grievances and a desire for greater freedoms. The Syrian government responded violently to these protests, and the conflict soon turned into armed conflict." What started out in March of 2011 simply as a peaceful demonstration of people in the country wanting to raise their voices and make the country aware of some of the things that were keeping them down and asking for more freedom, was not understood as a peaceful voice, and the government was threatened, and immediately military conflict took over. That conflict has now become an international conflict, further complicating efforts to resolve it. Iran and Russia, as well as groups like Hezbollah, are lending their support to the Syrian government led by President Bashar al-Assad. Other governments in the region, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar, have given substantial support to the Syrian opposition. Wealthy individuals from the Gulf have also provided significant funding. Increasingly, Islamic fighters from various countries have joined the fight against the Syrian government, including some groups classified by the U.S. as terrorist. The U.S. government has aligned itself with the opposition. It claims that this stems from a desire to support the revolution's original democratic demands, but the decision is also driven by U.S. political, military, and economic interests. Jesus promised his disciples the gift of peace. In a world where naked power and violence often gain the upper hand, Jesus refused to be trapped by false assumptions that separate and divide people. The world's attempt to bring peace is built on false assumptions. Making false assumptions is around us every day. Several years ago, I observed a 15-minute news segment that highlighted false assumptions. The first part of the news story was about the video game industry, which had resulted in a booming economy in Dallas, Texas. It seemed like the video industry had caught a nerve, and people were just flocking to get the video games. And what made many of the video games so attractive was their depiction of scenes of violent combat, which often had a super soldier prevailing as hero. This is what was selling: conflict and the emergence of a superhero, a superman, a super soldier who was prevailing to take charge and control. In less than 5 minutes after this rather elaborate story came another story. This story, the actual account of a soldier who had recently returned from the battlefield, missing both legs and part of one arm. And in the interview which followed, he ended with these words: "War is no game. War is no game. False assumptions. We're inviting our children and youth to play war games on videos, thinking that this is fun. And then we hear real live testimony. War is no game. In a world where naked power and violence often gain the upper hand, Jesus refused to be trapped by false assumptions that separate and divide people. Jesus offered an alternative way of feeling, thinking, and living, a gift more valuable than anything the world could ever offer. That's why the Living Bible translation, peace of mind and heart, is so helpful in our understanding where peaceful pursuits begin. They begin in our mind. They begin in our heart. We have to think and feel peace before we can expect to realize peace. What we feed our mind on is what we think about. And if we think about something long enough, we'll start to believe it. And when we believe something, we'll start to act on it. So go back to the illustration of the video game. Over and over and over, the mind is told that this is how we settle conflict. This is how we win. And as the mind keeps thinking, the mind starts to believe, this is right. This is what we're going to do. And as we begin to believe more of that, then we take the next step, and this is what I'm going to do now to settle conflict. We have to think and feel peace before we can expect to realize it. Peace was a reoccurring theme in Jesus' conversation, especially after the resurrection. And when Jesus joined his fearful followers on the evening of the day he was raised from the dead, his first words were, "Peace be with you. Peace be with you." And once the disciples recognized him and began rejoicing that the risen Lord is in our midst, again he said, "Peace be with you." Were they recalling Jesus' words of comfort and promise he had spoken to them days before he had died? I give you peace. I give you peace, the kind of peace that only I can give. It isn't like the peace that the world gives. So don't be afraid. Don't be worried. Don't let your hearts be troubled. And don't let them be afraid. Is this what the disciples were remembering, being locked in a room and filled with fear following Jesus' death? One of the sad realities of our time is that so few people remember or are willing to risk trusting the promise Jesus made. Instead of receiving Jesus' gift of peace, we persist in fortifying ourselves against other people and nations. We lock our doors. We lock our cars. We defend our towns and cities. We strangle our economy with taxes for military spending and then continue to argue in Washington about ways to reduce the national debt. What is the root of our problem? Very simply, Jesus says that the root of our problem is fear. F-E-A-R, fear. When persons do not rest in God's promises, they become afraid. And when persons become afraid, they turn to violence to protect themselves. And that is as true here in Moundridge, Kansas, as it is in our large cities and in the nations around the world. Persons who address feelings of fear without quieting the presence of Jesus' peace within their hearts will automatically turn to forceful and violent means to protect themselves. Fear causes us to react. It's not proactive, it's reactive. We sense something that generates fear, and immediately we spring into action. peaceful feelings cause us to relax and release those fearful feelings which make us tight and make us ready to lash out. Henry Nouwen, a motivational thinker and writer for Living the Christian Way, once observed that most people living in the 20th century lived in the house of fear most of the time. It became an obvious dwelling place and an acceptable basis on which to make decisions and plan lives. And the same continues to be true in our 21st century. When fear becomes so commonplace, it is no wonder that people can hardly hear Jesus' words or risk trusting Jesus' promise of peace. What Jesus continues to offer to the world is an alternative to fear, an intimate relationship with God in which we are like branches securely attached to a life-giving vine. Within the safety net of such a relationship, we can open ourselves to God's love, which cleanses and transforms our fear-filled hearts. The urge to protect and fortify is now replaced with a desire to love and make peace. But such a transition cannot be maintained without the close companionship of other Christians. Because the world around us is so contaminated and saturated with fear and violence, we will inevitably succumb to the destructive influence if we are not part of a circle of people that we are committed to love and peace. We can't do this alone. We need each other, and this is why we need the community of Christians gathering together to worship, to learn, to teach, to fellowship, to have fun together, to work together, so that we support each other in this tremendous task that lies before us. Within the intimacy of a community of Christ followers, we find courage to face our fears, and we have courage to confess our own violent reactions to some of the things that surround us. We learn to trust, to forgive, and to reach out with open hands and hearts to everyone God has created. This is the witness of Marty Troyer, the peace pastor who currently is serving as pastor at the Houston Mennonite Church in Houston, Texas, where Bette and I had the privilege of serving during the decade of the 70s. What began for Pastor Marty as a blog to about 30 people in the Houston Mennonite Church family today reaches an online audience to tens of thousands of people in the greater Houston area. On one occasion, Pastor Troyer's blog received 15,000 hits within these 6 hours of publishing. This success story starts in the fall of 2008, when Troyer began serving as pastor of Houston Mennonite Church. 6 months into his time there, the leadership team posed the question, what does it mean for us as a Mennonite congregation to offer a distinctively Christian peace presence in the city of Houston, Texas? The answer to that question began to take shape as Pastor Marty Troyer began writing, and as his writing skills were turned loose on the Houston Mennonite webpage. Pastor Marty chose not to write articles. He chose not to write books. Rather, he chose the webpage as his vehicle for communication. At first, the blogging was simply between church members. But in time, it caught the attention of the belief editor of the Houston Chronicle, a major newspaper in Houston, who communicated with Marty saying, I want you to blog as a Houstonian about the peace. And I want you to do that from a Christian perspective. And this is just what the leadership team at Houston Mennonite had been discussing for years. The peace message was no longer to be limited as a Mennonite message. It was to become a Christian message for all the city of Houston to hear. Years of ministry. From our own nearly 10 years of pastoral ministry in the 70s, where our own personal emphasis was sharing a peace-loving presence with our neighbors, to the formation of a Houston Mennonite track team whose goal was to give opportunity for positive release of youthful energy in the community and the city, to the Goshen College education majors who came to Houston to teach in the impoverished communities of the city, to the pastors who have come and gone, leaving their peace witness in the greater Houston area, and among them being Pastor Leo Hartshorn, who the Mennonite Church USA has over time acknowledged as the drummer for peace. All these efforts, which began in the 70s and now is growing up in the 2014 era, all these efforts and many more are now beginning to bear fruit. From the skeptic who posted the extremely negative comment, "You just wait and see, no one will read this stuff," from this liberal socialist pastor, to the Houston Chronicle editor who invited Marty's participation on the newspaper's website, the journey of speaking one's faith in public continues to be tested and affirmed. On July 4, 2011, Marty Troyer sent a letter to President Obama in which he challenged the president to exercise the biblical mandate to turn bombs into plowshares and teach children war no more. But until you are willing to do that, Mr. President, please take responsibility for all the deaths of war, including the countless numbers who have fallen on the battlefields around the world, and those who have come home just to commit suicide in order to escape the trauma they witnessed and bore on the battlefields where they served, as well as the emotionally and morally wounded soldiers returning home. The gift of peace, as wonderful as it is not just for the benefit of individual Christians or communities of Christians. It is meant to be the foundation for a way of living in the world. As a trademark of Jesus' followers, it is to characterize all our attitudes and all of our actions, private as well as public. When we trust God in life as well as death, then we are set free to become peacemakers in a broken world. With nothing to lose and everything to gain, we can then truly be the children of God. In the words of last Sunday's scripture, read here in this place from Colossians 3:15, and then followed by Pastor Brad's sermon. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts and begin to make a difference in our broken world. Amen.